if you think of your room growing up, you probably could remember what was on the walls because you saw it so many times and you made a picture in your brain. Once it's in your brain, it will stay there. Put things in your brain that are important by making a fun way to memorize it, and it will stay in there forever.
Welcome, everyone, to the Warrior Podcast. Today I have a special guest, Mike Byster. We were friends on the trading floor. He was a trader. He started an award-winning system called Brainetics, which is learning to optimize the power of our brain. He's been featured on 2020. He was the winner of Superhuman, which is a pretty cool show. With that said, Mike Byster, welcome to the Warrior Podcast.
Thank you, Frank. Great to be here.
Awesome. So we're going to do a lot of cool stuff with your massive brain, and you're going to overwhelm my medium-sized brain. But let's talk a little bit about your history in the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Rogers Park, north side of the city, and then at age of 7, we moved to Skokie, and I spent my next 15 years there, went to University of Illinois, and the day out of, when I was in college, people always said I should be a trader because of my mind and what I could do. And I got a finance degree. I had a couple job offers, and my dad told me, why don't you give it a shot? So he gave me a little bit of money, and I went down to the floor, and the rest, worked out pretty well. And the biggest problem I had about the floor, even though I loved the floor, I loved the guys on the floor, I always liked helping other people. And that was the one thing that I used to think, I'm only in it for myself on the floor. It's only about me. But what I learned is the floor gave me freedom to develop and help other people because I was my own boss. And so anytime I wanted to go and leave at 11:30 and help out of school, I was able to do that. So the floor was the best thing that ever happened to me because even though it wasn't what I wanted to do in a way, it gave me the independence to master my craft, and which was great.
Okay, well, so your superior mind just blasted through a whole decades
I know,
of history.
I will not.
So,
I could slow down,
yeah,
but I was just saying that was the basic.
Yeah, so that's good. That gives me good direction. So when you were going through all your schooling and your education, were you an outstanding student?
Okay, the thing that there was one story, everyone has a come-to moment, and I had two of them. Everyone that sees my dad, he's so good with numbers, they think I get it from my dad. I actually get it from my mom because even though she can't add 2 and 2, she was the most logical person brain-wise that I've ever met. And because she was so logical, she taught me how to use my brain with my basic number ability and turn it into something much, much bigger. And I'll never forget when I was in 3rd grade, anyone that has lived winters in Chicago knows of the snowstorms. We always had to walk across fields to get to my schools. And my mom would always yell at me because I never wore boots, and I hated to wear boots. And my mom always thought, well, I'm not going to even ask him why he hates to wear boots. And one day she says, no, you're going to have to wear boots. They're expecting 8 inches of snow or whatever, and you always come back and your shoes are soaking wet. And so I broke down. I told her, Mom, the reason why I don't like to wear boots is I can't tell my left foot from my right foot. And I don't know what to do. When I had boots, I'd always put them on backwards and the kids would laugh at me and stuff like that. And so I just didn't want to wear boots. And I would always go to bed and worry about it. And it was and my mom said to me, well, why don't I just write R and L in your boots? I said, Mom, the kids will see it. You take the boots off in the back and R and L in the boots. And my mom said to me, how about this? I'll write your name in each boot. I'll write Michael Byster in each boot. All the kids have their name in the boots. And they go, And I go, yeah. She goes, well, in the left boot, I'll underline Michael because it ends in L. And the right boot, I'll underline Byster because it ends in R. And my mom, in like 30 seconds, thought of that. And I realized if I think of a way to do things, I probably could solve a lot of problems. And instead of just saying, oh my gosh, my mom taught me problem solving with that little story. And it changed my life because instead of looking and say, I can't do that, I figure out how to do that. And so it was such a big selling point to me, that not to look at, figure out what you can and can't do is then what you want to be able to do. How do you reach that?
That's such a simple little story. So your mother was logical, but then I automatically default to problem solving. That's
right.
Just solving a problem.
That's
right?
exactly it.
So before we go into this is one of the things that I try to teach people. You're teaching optimization of the brain, and I am kind of too, but moreover, differently is, I call it internal mastery. So the more our emotions take over, the more it dilutes our brain's ability to actually problem solve and use the logical part of our brain. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
So your mother, would you say she must have had a pretty good control over her emotions, right?
Yeah, and she would just think outside the box, and she was creative, and that being creative was such a key, because like my dad could, multiply like 42 times 23, but he has no idea how he does it. I break it down, and it's just the difference between, who we are and what we could do.
So it sounds like you got kind of the best of both brains there, didn't you?
And yeah, like my sister is way smarter than me, in my opinion. She didn't get she got my mom's logic, but nothing from my dad. And I was lucky to get a little bit of both because, the difference between my sister and myself is my sister, if I have no interest in the subject, I don't learn it. I can't. It just boring. My sister could take the most boring thing in the world and pick it up like that. And that's who she was. And, like when I would write, we had people that did our manual for Brainetics. And when I would write down things for our manual, and they would have professional readers, proofreaders, go through it, and then I would send it to my sister, and she would say, "Okay, this is what they missed." So she
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and she wasn't, she's just a lawyer, but she had such an amazing brain. She's my hero when it comes to brains. She just can't do what I do. So we have a mutual admiration where I look smarter than she is, but Beth and I both know the truth.
Are you sure you want that in the
okay.
podcast? That's awesome. All right, so. Man, you moved pretty fast. So you did good in school, yes?
Yeah, I mean, I was okay. The story number 2, which was the story that really changed my life, was when I was in 4th grade. And there was I was in 3rd grade, I had this great teacher. Her name was Mrs. Carlson. And Mrs. Carlson comes in one day and says, what I really want everyone to do is to memorize the planets of the solar system in order from the sun. She goes, I'm going to ask everyone to go to the back of the class. Don't come back to the front until you have all 9 planets memorized. She said, but before you go to the back of the class, I want everyone to remember this sentence. My very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas. And she goes, the first letter of each of those words is one of the planets. My is M for Mercury, very V for Venus, educated, E for Earth, Mother, M for Mars, just J, Jupiter, served S, Saturn, S, Uranus, 9M, Neptune, P, Pizza, Pluto. And Ms. Carlson says, now, memorize that sentence. Now go to the back of the room and see how long it takes you to memorize the 9 planets in order. And in less than 5 minutes, every single kid, not just the smart kids or not just some of the kids, every kid knew the 9 planets just like that. And everything Mrs. Carlson taught us in 3rd grade, she taught us a fun way to memorize it. Well, then I'm in 4th grade. I have this new teacher. Her name is Mrs. Sane. One day she comes in, passes out a sheet of paper. Left-hand margin, 50 states, United States. Right-hand margin, 50 state capitals. Mrs. Sane says, what I really want you to do is go home overnight, study as hard as you could, come back tomorrow, have as many of the 50 state capitals memorized as possible. I said, oh, this will be so easy. I did the 9 plants in 5 minutes. I'll knock this off in like a half hour at the most. I don't know if you know this about me, Frank, but I'm the most stubborn human being on the planet. I hate saying I can't do something. I studied that sheet all night long, and I mean all night long, under the covers with a flashlight. I came to school the next day. No one, including me, knew more than 7 or 8 of the state capitals. So I started thinking back to why was Miss Carlson's class so easy and Mrs. Sain's class so hard? So I raised my hand and Miss Sain called on me and I said, Miss Sain, I think you forgot to teach us the fun way we're supposed to do to memorize the state capitals. Mrs. Sain said, there is no fun way. The only way you memorize the state capitals is you stare at the sheet over and over again. So I went home and I went to my mom. I said, Mom, it wasn't just me. Every single kid in the class knew 9 plants in 5 minutes. This time we had all night long. We're 4th graders, not 3rd graders. No one could memorize the state capitals because that's Mrs. Carlson always taught us this fun way. Mrs. Sain said there is no fun way. So my mom said, let's make up our own fun way. And this is where my mom's creativity came. She went in the back room for a half hour, 45 minutes. Then she brought me in. She had written like a little songish poem that put all 50 state capitals in a song. I practiced the song with her a few times. I came back the next day, I came to school. I knew all 50 state capitals. No one knew more than 10 or 11. And I felt like the smartest kid in the world. And I wanted that feeling forever. So my mom wasn't going to do it for me anymore. I had to figure out my own way to memorize everything. And it was just that bit of, excitement that I had that motivated me to develop my own memory system, how I can memorize. My mom is songs and poems. I'm not like that. I figure out different ways to memorize things depending on, what it is. So it was all the feeling that for the first time in my life, I felt smart and I wanted that feeling for every kid. It really is. And that's what motivates me.
That's awesome. So is your mother still with us?
No, she is not. And that was hard for me because the nice thing is I speak to schools all the time. And every time I'm at a school, I always have parents in the audience, and I always tell parents, this is why I could do what I could do. So I feel like I honor her every day by keeping her memory alive. And so it really is nice that I get to tell, because my dad, everyone thought I was like my dad. I really am more like my mom.
That's awesome. And it's awesome you pay her tribute. And I had told you at the beginning of this, the reason why I do the podcast is so people can leave a legacy piece. Like, wouldn't it be nice if your mother did a 2 or 3 hour interview that talked about her life and everything? It would be nice to go back and do that.
She actually did, which we did, and we were also
awesome.
Like a year before she died, someone came up with that idea that you should do that, and we did it, which is great. I mean, when you said that, it was so close to my heart. So
awesome.
We didn't do it with my dad, but we did it with my mom.
All right. So you graduated college with a degree in finance, did you say? So did you go to the floor right out of college, or did you take a regular job?
My cousin was a big time trader on the floor, and he told me, he didn't really help me, but he told me to give it a shot because of my mind. And I went on the floor, and I thought it would be easy, but it was harder for me than most things because where I had an advantage over most people is when it was a fast market.
Tell everybody what a fast market is.
A fast market is like when unemployment comes out, the numbers come out, usually 10 or 15 minutes, the market goes up and down in a crazy fashion, and then it stabilizes itself, and then everything becomes sort of normal again. But that 10 or 15 minutes usually can make or break, a week's worth of work. You can make as much if you're a local trader like I was in that 10 or 15 minutes as you could do the rest of the time because the market just creeps along up and down, up and down. And here it goes up 7 or 8 points and down 5 or 6. And I was able to spread, which is seeing the relationship between two different markets. Like if one market goes up, like I would trade like June and SEP Eurodollars, and sometimes I would do June SEP and DEES or whatever it is. And if one market goes up 8 and the other goes up 3, and they should be going up together the same amount, I know to sell the one that went up 8 and buy the one that went up 3. So when the smoke clears, they're going to end up the same amount. If they both end up 20 higher, Then the one that I sold at 8, I lost 12 points on, but the one I bought at 3, I make 17 points on. So just by knowing the relationship and what should happen in the markets, when the markets went crazy and out of whack, that's where I had an advantage. The other 35 hours a week, I had no advantage in my opinion.
All right, so let's color this out a little bit. First of all, would I have known your cousin?
Norm?
Oh, Norm was the one that told you to come on?
Oh, no, the one that told me to come on. I'm sorry. I told Norm to come on. I thought, no, my cousin, Stuart Gimbel.
Okay, I remember the name, but I did not know him. Yeah,
he was before. He came down to the Merc for a few years while you were there, but he went to the Board of Trade, and then he came back to the Merc for a couple of years, and we hardly had any interaction, Stuart and I.
All right, so you said your dad gave you some money, so was that to fund a trading account and lease a seat?
Yeah.
And then, so now you're walking into the pit. You've never been in the pit.
Right.
You don't know hand signals for sure, right?
Right.
So,
but we took a class, and that's where I learned everything. But the trading part, I had to just sit there and watch.
did you take the trading class from Lamont and
No,
Romney?
I didn't.
No, the hand signals one?
Right. No, I did not. I had to learn the hand signals, and then I just went in and I had to figure it out for myself. And the first few weeks were scary, but I'm a quick learner, and I saw the spreads and the way the spread moves. No one taught me to spread. They just taught me to just stand in front of someone, and everyone else had good relationships with brokers. They knew broker. I didn't know one person. And so I had to figure it out for myself. And then when I brought Norm along and I brought Howard Gartzman, I don't know if you remember him.
Of course I do.
Yeah, he was one of my closest friends, and he was best man at my wedding. And I taught them everything that I knew, and they were able to make a decent life. But if I wasn't able to figure out how to teach myself, which is one of my better qualities that I have, I would have been in deep trouble, because everyone thought, oh, your numbers are going to be great, but it only helped during the fast market, and there weren't that many fast markets.
I was on the floor. That was the main part of my career. And, I was a broker, so I was not trading my own money. I was just buying and selling for my customers. One of the things I always remembered about you was you didn't stand around and bid an offer. You hit a bid or you lifted an offer. For people out there who don't understand, traders will stand with their, I want to buy it at this price, or I want to sell it at that price. And you do that all day hoping you get hit by somebody, to initiate a trade. But you were hitting other people. Right. That's what I remember about you. You didn't waste any time. Also, to your credit, there were so many politics down there. Right. And everybody who's been on this show on trading floor guys will reflect on the politics. Who you got to have relationships with brokers and stuff for them to trade with you. You didn't do that.
Right.
I mean, you had good relationships, but at the onset, you were just...
It was hard because Norm and I and Howard, the thing about Norm ended up dwarfing me. I taught them everything I know, and Norm had the confidence to pull, if you're offering 100, I might buy 30 or 40 when it's time to hit. Norm would buy them all because he knew we were right, but I never had the guts to say, if I'm wrong, this one time I'm wrong, I'm going to have to move back home with my dad or something. You know what I mean? I always admired him because I taught him, some stuff, and he went on from there and had the guts to do things that I never had the guts to do.
We'll talk about Norm a little bit, and then I want you to tell everybody, how you train him. Norm was one of the biggest traders. He's a big man physically, and when you talk to him, I don't see any ego in him, and he's very soft-spoken. He's funny as hell, okay? I used to play golf with him and Ice over here at Dub's Dread every weekend. And I remember one particular instance where the number came out and the market was breaking hard. And Norm was standing in the middle of the pit, and he just held out his hands and he goes, 5 bid. He's screaming, 5 bid. Okay. And Tommy Arundel, who was one of the biggest traders, goes, sold. And Norm goes, buy 5,000. And Tommy's like, He goes, fuck you, 500. And then Jeff Allen goes, sold. And Norm goes, 2,000. He goes, fuck you, 200, right? So the smoke clears, and I call Norm over. I go, dude, you just slam dunk like the two biggest locals in here. He goes, hey, man, nothing personal. 5,000 was my number. I wasn't trying to be a smartass, and that was the low. He held the market at that price, you know, and I'll never forget that.
Right. I mean, he, you know, like I said, the things we did together, but I would never have the guts in a million years. What if I'm wrong? But he knew when he was right. That gambling thing held on to him because years later, I don't know which one it was, but Vander Holyfield was fighting for, I don't know if it was one of the Tyson fights or whatever it is, and Norm went to watch it. And Norm was, you know, like Holyfield was making millions for that fight, 5 million, 10 million, or whatever it was. And they were playing blackjack, only the two of them at a table. And Holyfield was betting like 100. Norm was betting 5,000, which was the limit at the time. And so I said, you know, but he just had to feel that I'm right. I wish I had that, because even though he was doing some of the things I taught him, I make mistakes, but, you know, he just had the guts that he you know, it was just an incredible trait that always made me a bit envious of what he could do.
Most people don't understand why trading is so difficult. It's human nature that we don't like to be wrong. Right. So that's something it's hard for us to say sorry and sorry, I messed up. When we put on a trade, right, we want to be right. So if the market goes in the correct direction, we have a tendency to get out of the trade too soon because it makes us right. I was right. But then when the trade goes against us, we want to be right. So we hold on to it longer in the hopes it comes back, right? So we ride the losers too long and we don't ride the winners long enough, right? So, but with Norm, yes, he had balls. I mean, let's just say how we would say it on the floor. I remember one day he was clearing hammer stone, which was 245, and then I think one day he came in and he had another. It was either 750 or whatever clearinghouse. They go, Norm, what happened with hammer? He goes, oh well, I lost $1 million yesterday, and they didn't want to carry me anymore. And he chuckled about it, right? $1 million in a day. So
Norm had this thing, and I don't know if you know, I don't think he would care, but I ended up like he had the non-care attitude, and so he ended up like not coming in, and I couldn't handle it if he would lose money. So I would get out of his stuff and stuff like that. But he was just so, you know, we talked about it one day. We came down. Now that I'm handling his stuff, I would pick up his sheets every day because he'd walk in at 7:20, or sometimes he'd walk in at 9 o'clock or 9:30. And I just said, Norm, I just have to make sure you're flat, you're even. And so while I would do mine, which would take 5 minutes, I would take 20 minutes to look at Norm's and cross off. Like Jimmy Mazurka was his out trade. We became great friends, me and Jimmy Mazurka.
Yeah, he's one of my best friends too.
Oh, really? He's such a great guy. And Norm and I just had, you know, this was in the 90s. We just talked one day, and I said, you know, Norm, more than half the days you're here, you have 6-figure days, up or down. And I said, I've never had a 6-figure day up or down. I said, you know, and you live like that. And, you know, so it was just amazing what his stomach was able to take and do. And so, you know, it's a great thing. And next time you see Jimmy, tell him I said hi. I really thought he was fantastic.
So Jimmy Mazurka, we'll sidebar with him, talk about like having some savant capabilities. In my opinion, the greatest out-trade clerk that ever lived.
He was amazing.
He had more sheets and more brokers, and he had things memorized. He'd look at you from across the room. You wouldn't even have made it to him yet. And he goes, hey, Pump, you're good on this trade with Norm, He had it all locked and loaded. I was standing in a circle with Jimmy and 3 other guys that we were all out trade clerks, okay? Yeah. And I jestingly said, at the count of 3, point to the person who was the best out trade clerk, right? I go 1, 2, 3. And all 4 of the guys, including Jimmy, pointed to themselves, and I pointed at Jimmy. Oh, right. I go, you guys, screw you guys. He's the winner right there, okay?
Yeah, it's a great story. It's so awesome.
Yeah, so that's awesome. So So you're learning your trade, you bring Norm in, and then like, how are you tutoring him? Are you
Well, I
teaching
just
him
teach him how to spread different markets and stuff like that. And I would just teach him the basics. And then he started clerking and working for a guy named Lance Weiss. You know, Lance, he might have been a little before.
Yeah, I didn't know him.
Yeah. And he was just there for a year or two. But Norm learned from him a couple things. He learned from me a couple things. And then at the end, he was just, you know, like the things he learned by himself, I never taught him because like I never taught him how to say, okay, you know, and at his wedding, I was best man at his wedding, and I gave this speech, and I said, you know, the one thing I really loved about you is not being the big trader you were. You have more integrity than anyone I've ever met, and that's who he was.
Wow, that's huge.
Because it really was. He stood up to all of his trades. He never took advantage of them. He helped the little guys when they were there. He really was. He was just a, you know, true blue, great person. I was proud to be so close to him because, like I said, everyone knew what I could do with my mind, but I was just an average guy on the floor. Norm was this larger than life, and, you know, he never changed to who he was, except, you know, now he could afford, you know, we used to always joke that, you know, he lived at home for the first 2 or 3 years. He's trading, and here's a guy trading 1,000 lots, and then he'd go back home and go to bed in the Chicago Bear sheets because his parents never changed his room. And just like, you know, this big hulking guy. And so it was just an incredible thing just to picture Norm. He was just like, you know, great person.
Before we finish off the trading floor stuff, when did you realize it was time to go? Was it because the floor became electronic or because you had other aspirations?
About 1997, I started speaking to schools because people had always said, because I was always speaking to schools like once a week, once every couple of weeks. And then I said, you know what, I want to look the trading floor. We started going to half ticks, and then it's a lot of different things started happening, and people were starting to carry little computer, you know, and I said, I never wanted to stay. I ended up staying over 20 years. I was always had this thing after 10 years, I wanted to go help kids, but it was always tough for me to leave the money I was making and the freedom I had. But eventually I said this was the time, and I started doing more and more. And then the Chicago Sun-Times and Tribune did articles about me back to back. And all of a sudden I started getting a lot of calls from local TV stations. I said, time to go and make this bigger than big. And so once I started doing local and getting on WGN and all that stuff, national news started, you know, in 2020 was the first one that called me. And, you know, after that, they've been on for like 25 years at the time. Now they've been on for over 40, and they said they received more email from my piece than any piece they've ever done. And a guy that invented a product called OxyClean, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners have heard of. He's a billionaire in Colorado. He saw the piece and had just sold OxyClean to Arm & Hammer, and he said, let's work together and help all these kids, and that's how that started. But it took me a few years of developing my program once I said it was time to go to schools every day, then build a program for smart kids, kids that struggle, kids with learning disabilities, you know, all these kids that hate math, kids that love math, and try to build a program that everyone could use. And what was amazed me is that so many people that used our program were not kids, they were adults. And so it turned out to be something that was bigger than I could have ever dreamed happened to me. But it was something that I had to have someone, a business partner that knew how to really promote it and get it to be a good thing. I know I skip ahead.
Try to tell our listeners here and me kind of the summary of Brainetics. Like what are you actually doing? Is it association, like things you told your mom told you? How would you describe it?
Well, I would say what I found from people is there were certain learning skills that most people never master, which I mastered, and that's why I could do all the things. How to focus, how to follow directions. I know people think, oh, follow directions. No, it's really reading directions and being able to read something and understand what it says before going on. Being able to think outside the box, because people always do things the way they're taught instead of thinking what way works best for myself. You know what I mean? And people that think outside the box are people that change the world, in my opinion. And so I teach people how to look for what works better for you and how to increase your mental capacity, how to keep more information in your mind by organizing it, how to forget information once it's not important anymore. And all these things that are really important learning skills, I teach, and I teach everything in a fun and cool way that you think you're playing a game, but you're learning. And once you learn and you learn the skills, you become much better at it. Just by teaching them something and saying to do it this way, solves a problem for a day, but it doesn't solve a problem for life. And that's what I try to do.
Would you say outside the box, is that critical thinking? Is that what you would consider critical thinking?
Absolutely. No, I tell people, like, what I would do, just for a test for people to say is walk into any business, walk into any restaurant and look around and start getting good at it and say, if I owned this business, what would I change? What would I change about the menu? And you start coming up with ideas every day of your life and thinking, okay, I should do this, this, and this. And then you start bringing it onto your own life, which is really important, because I always tell people, if a teacher explains something to you and you don't understand it, that doesn't mean that they're not right, because they probably, from their experience, more people understand it this way. You have to figure out what way works best for you and really look, because I've worked with so many kids that were struggling, and then I'll get letters 10 years later that they got a college scholarship or they got this. And it's just so rewarding to me to know that all they needed to do was, it was okay to think creatively. Because a lot of times when I was growing up, if I did something, even if I showed my work and it wasn't the way the teacher told us, they would give me half off or all off. And teachers are usually different today. They welcome if a kid could think differently. And if they don't welcome it, they should look hard at themselves. Why don't I welcome a kid that thinks creatively? But kids usually just do it exactly the way they're taught. And I try to show people by doing a math problem all these different ways you could do it, which way works best for you.
So that's really good. You almost answered then my next question in its entirety. You and I are kind of on the same mission. Like we want to help others with whatever we have as a gift. I say shed light in the world. Whatever our light is, let it shine. We're on the same mission for the most part. I'm trying to open up people's minds too. I don't have a particular system, and I'm not, with numbers like you, but it's through asking questions to people. We're so set in our ways. And I learned the hard way, like talking about politics or even science is, somebody said this, we don't derive our opinions from facts. We choose our facts based on our opinion.
Right.
And that is not critical thinking. Critical thinkers know two things. All information is subject to bias, and I myself are subject to bias, and bias is not conducive to critical thinking. You have to really open up your mind, try to abandon your biases, and be open to everything, right?
And it's the hardest thing in the world to do.
Super hard. And I learned with politics, having spirited debates with people on the other side, we're so clannish as human beings. We pick our side, and we stay staunch on our side. This is where I'm getting my acceptance, and I'm part of something, and it has nothing to do with logic or creativity or open-mindedness. It's loyalty to a thought process, right? So I think you would showing the kids different ways to get to the same answer is pretty cool, actually, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that. I could give you an example if you want. I mean, I don't know if people have. So I'm just going to throw something out. Like, say if you wanted to multiply two numbers that are 20 apart. Okay, so say you want to multiply 35 times 55. Okay. Now, like I said, I teach them a bunch of shortcuts. The reason why I teach them a bunch of shortcuts, there's a bunch of different ways to get to things. So if you have a problem like 35 times 55, the answer to that is 1925. But these numbers are 20 apart. So two numbers that are 20 apart that ends in 5, here's 3 ways you could do it. You could take the smaller number, which is 3, multiply it by 1 greater than the larger number. 3 times 6 is 18, and then add 1 is 19. So it's a smaller number, add 1 to the larger number, multiply them together, plus 1 is the first part of the answer. The second part is always going to be 25. Or you could take the smaller number, which is 3, add 1 to that, multiply them together, 4 times 5 is 20, and subtract 1, and it'll get 19. Or you can multiply the two numbers together, 3 times 5 is 15, and add the number in the middle, which is 4, is 19. So any number that's 20 apart will work by doing one of those 3 methods. And I'm just, almost everything I teach has multiple methods, and the kids just need to learn, hey, there's all these different ways to get to the same answer. Which way is working best for me?
So it's memorization too, right? Because you have to memorize the method.
Right,
correct?
but then I teach them ways to memorize, like my mom with the state capitals, writing a song, and I teach people how to memorize things like, no matter what you want to memorize, if you use a device like a mnemonic device, or if you're good at art, make a drawing, you can memorize and look at your drawing. I had a kid, it was so cool to me. I get all these emails, and in 4th grade, he had to memorize the President of the United States. And he went online, this is several years ago, maybe 10 years ago, he took each picture of every president of the United States and pasted it around his room counterclockwise. And he said Washington was on his nightstand, Adams was on his alarm clock, Jefferson was, next, and so, and every night for a half hour before he went to bed, like the week before the test where he had to memorize the presidents, he would just go around the room and stare at all the presidents. And then when he took the test, he just pretended like he was in his room, looked around, knew all the presidents. And while I get a lot of stories, what was really cool about that kid, he said 4 years later, they had to take the Constitution test in 8th grade. And his 8th grade teacher said, before we learn the Constitution, I want everyone to learn the presidents. And so he goes, you cannot take the Constitution test until you learn the presidents. And all his classmates were freaking out. He said he never opened up a book. He just went, and for the first time in 4 years, he looked imaginary room, and it came back to him. Because if you have something that you memorize by looking at it over, like I don't know if you know this, but right now, if you think of your room growing up, you probably could remember what was on the walls and what was there because you saw it so many times and you made a picture in your brain without knowingly. But once it's in your brain, it will stay there. And I try to tell people, put things in your brain that are important by making a fun way to memorize it, and it will stay in there forever. And that kid said he never, ever thought about it after that. But the first time he didn't even say, I have to go back and do it again. It just stayed there.
Awesome. So we talked about maybe doing a little demonstration.
Okay.
Now's a good time to do the demonstration?
Sure. Absolutely. So you wrote down a bunch of numbers, 2-digit numbers, added them up, got a total, took the total, and divided it by another 2-digit number. So you could say the numbers as fast as you want to go. When you get to the end, pause a second, say divided by it, and it carries out to a lot of places, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so when I get to the end, if I get it right, fingers crossed, then just when I hit the last digit, you could stop me. But the last digit might be one number off the final answer because calculators usually round off, and I'm giving the exact. So
you're probably going to go out further than I did.
Well, yeah. So but you don't have to. I could go out forever, but just when I get to the end, you might as well stop me.
All right, guys. So we used to do this in the trading pit when we were slow. We'd call Mike over and say, all right, let's go. So okay. I'm going to read these 2-digit numbers off as fast as I can, and I'm going to go divided by another number, right. And he's going to take it out, and we'll put this on the screen too.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
96, 45, 29, 37, 44, faster. 81, 65, 53, 19, 66, 41, 61.
Divided by?
Divided by 17.
That equals 37.47058823529. Are we good? Yeah.
That's insanity.
It is insanity, but when I do it, it's one thing. When the kids do it, it's way more cool. But
That's incredible.
Right. And so, I'm still lucky because I get to do things that keep me close to trading and keep me close to teaching. And so I got the best of both worlds now.
Awesome. So let's backtrack to blackjack and tell me, how did you do playing blackjack with your...
In the late 70s, early 80s, I was on a show called Friday Night with Jay Levine, and I was just a kid. And I did this thing where I took a deck of cards. Someone pulled out a card out of a deck of cards, and within 15 or 20 seconds, I could look through a deck of cards and tell which card's missing. And so I did it, and then I was, okay, I want to see this on TV. That was, I think, October 5th, 1979. And October 5th, 1979 was the day the Pope came to Chicago. So the show that was supposed to be on at 11 o'clock at night was pushed back till 2 in the morning. So I was so upset. And so it's only a local show, Chicago. And here I am doing a card thing. And by Monday, even though it was only seen in Chicago, even though it was only on at 2 or 3 in the morning, I got letters from every casino in Vegas putting me on a blacklist. It's an amazing thing how they even heard about this and knew this, that it was in the middle of the night in Chicago. One thing of me looking, but that's how much they were scared of like having people like me on. So I've always been on a blacklist. So when I go, I always went under a friend's name or whatever it was. So I'm able to do okay in Vegas. And, I see a blackjack picture that you have over there, but it was too much like work for me because, it's like gambling all day on the trading floor. But almost every time I've won, I've made money, and I tell people, don't go to Vegas without, give me a call. I'll get you at least breaking even.
Tell me if you remember this story. Norm is a big blackjack player, at least he used to be. You went to the boats one time, and the day after you came back, and I go, how'd it go? And you said something to the effect like, you lost, 14 hands in a row or some astronomical number. And you said, for the first time in my life, I thought the game was fixed. Do you remember that?
Yeah. I remember having bad luck, but that no matter what you do, you can't, there are odds where, even, Michael Jordan missed shots at the end of games. And so you just have to feel like no matter what happens, some odds will catch up to you. But I know more times than not, I did do well, but I did have a couple times where I felt like, something's going on here.
I got into blackjack quite a bit. The bookshelf behind me has about 7 books on blackjack systems. And I thought, because being a broker on the floor, your brain becomes like an abacus, right? You buy them, and you're tailing everything under pressure. I'm like, I bet you I can count cards. So I started practicing. I put together an 8-deck shoe, and I would flip the cards out and keep the count. So by the time you get to the end of the deck, you want to be at 0, right? And then I would play blackjack and deal like 5 players and the dealer and keep the count with the hands and stuff like that. And I did pretty good at it.
Right.
So
did you have like 2 through 6 plus 1, 7 through 9, 0, and 10 through picture card minus 1 or whatever?
Yeah, that's the system I used. The problem with the system is that you're only playing to make 5 or 10% on your money, and that does not register with me. If I go sit at the table with $1,000, I want to walk away with at least $2,000, and that's not how it works. You're supposed to be good with $100 or $200 that's successful, right?
And that's what's hard about it. It's so long to get to get a little bit ahead. But if that's your job, and you back in that time, you're making $200, $300, $400 a day, and you don't know the trading firm for brains, that must have been nice for some people, you know what I mean?
Right.
But it's just too much work for me.
And now they're really changing the odds, right?
Right, 6 to 5 for blackjack.
And now they have the continual shuffle machines where there is no count, or if the cards are in a shoe, they put that kill card or whatever they call it halfway through and they reshuffle.
Right.
You don't let the shoe whittle down, right? That's
But
what you
I
want.
think that there are some smaller casinos that you could get to that you would be able to get by. I think that that's what people have told me. I've not played at a small casino in a long time, so I don't know.
Yeah, I go to Vegas every couple of years, and I'll sit there and I'll try and do my thing in my head and stuff like that just for fun. But I just play for fun now.
Yeah.
So
that's what I always did. It was too much of a job. I want to go to Vegas and I want to have fun if I can.
And I remember Norm was. This might get him in trouble, but he was going out there quite a bit back in the day, and they'd send a plane for him, and they'd take him out there. And he told me one time, I think Caesars was the place he was going to a lot, and he said, "Yeah, they gave me a printout of like what my losses are," and he goes, "I'm pretty sure it's at least double that."
Right,
so.
right. I mean, I'll never forget just by going with him. They bring like dozens of shrimp to the room. I felt like a king, I swear to God. It's like, but he was, that's who he was. But, so.
That's awesome. All right. So in present day, what is the mission now? Where are you at?
Right now I'm doing two things. I'm working with my son's company. We just got back from MIT, and we're going around the country finding the smartest math minds and trying to get them, turning them into traders. And so I have a math contest where I teach the kids, and we're teaching the smartest kids in the world. And it just so amazes me how quick these kids are, once I teach them, because you have to have natural ability besides learning what I could teach you. And these kids are doing these things, and it's so cool because they actually think what I do is cool. Most people think, oh, the king nerd is, but they think, oh my God, this is the coolest guy ever. He can multiply these numbers in his head, instead of knowing what other people think is a nerdy thing. They think it's a talent. But, it's really nice because I'm able to help my son's company, and it's a really good feeling for me to visit, like we went to Duke and we went to Penn and we went to Michigan, and, now we're in Chicago. We're going Northwestern University of Chicago, and it's really, really nice thing to meet some of the smartest math minds in the country and work with them, and then stay in touch with them by email, and some of them text me and they want to know more. And so it's a really fun thing for me to teach not only kids, but, college students. And the second thing I'm doing, which is really my legacy, is I'm working with my friend Lisa, and Lisa and I are working together to try. When I had Brainetics, it was expensive. It was a couple $100s. We sold a lot. We did a lot of great things. But Lisa and I are working to put all my stuff together and make it free. So when I was on 2020, a lot of the big corporations called me and wanted to do business, and I was unable to do business. I didn't want to work corporate America. I never wanted to do it that way. Now I want to, because I want a corporation to put their name behind it. You get all the credit. I don't care. But I need this to be free for everyone, because I've seen how many lives it's changed. And once the pandemic came in 2020, I noticed there was a big difference between kids in 2021 than there was in 2019 when I started going back. That year was a big year that they lost. So I could tell what areas like focus and different skills that kids had trouble with more than before the pandemic. And I wanted to work with them and try to pick that up too. So I want to make sure that every kid, every family, every teacher could learn what I've been able to teach a lot of kids and keep it for free. So Lisa and I are going to reach out and try to do some national shows and try to get out and say, who wants to, help us make this for free. And we think corporations, which give millions and millions and millions of dollars to schools, and they just write a blank check and say, buy some computers, they'll want to see their name up on the back. And, they'll want to keep it free like I want to keep it free. This is not about money. This is about putting your name out there and making a legacy for your company too.
Where does this come from? Where does this want to help mankind come
because
from?
when I was doing when I did my stuff, I visited a lot of Chicago area schools in a lot of the poorest areas. And I was in Brooklyn and the Bronx and Harlem. And I did all these, and I saw this is not a level playing field. Kids that don't have money, how could they do this? But I had a business. So it's like, even though we'd had commercials on, the people buying the product were people from the rich suburbs. And, and I said, I can't do this. And I wanted change. And it wasn't until I met Lisa really that, she had a public relations background, and, we talked about it together and said, they saw the impact of 2020. TV shows will want to do this. They want to, they want to get, and any parent that has a kid that's struggling or is doing great, but they're not reaching their full potential will see this and say, this is free. I could do this for free, and it's meant for families to do together. And so I saw how many units we sold and how long it lasted, that I said, if we could do this and have a strong corporation behind us that really cares, not that just saying, here, here's money, put our name in it. We want someone that really cares, that we could partner with, that, wants to change the world. And that's what I feel that we could do. And this will be my legacy, because even though Brainetics helped a lot of people, it only helped people that could afford it. And now I want to make sure that everyone has the advantage. And I see how we compare to all these other countries. And when our product was being sold in Japan and it was translated to Japanese, I got to be honest, and I don't know people. I hope the kids in Japan were way ahead of ours. When I went, I saw where ours were at a certain age.
It's real data. I mean, it's not
right,
even
right. That's what I'm saying. It's like, it's hard because I'm always a big USA fan, so I always want it to happen here. But I do see why we do a lot of recruiting overseas, and so at the end of the day, I think Lisa and I are going to impact a lot of people, and, we just are going to take our time and find the right companies and the right shows to do this in, because, it's a big thing, because I see what my son, who learned what I taught him how to do all my stuff, what he's doing with his life. And he knows that if he didn't learn certain things he wouldn't be where he is today. Education is the most important thing in the world, and it's where you make your life. And it's not I'm trying to even the playing field and help everyone.
I love this. And again, this is our missions are running down the same track. I call it internal mastery. I'm more, mastering our emotions. You're teaching the brain, optimizing the brain. But all of it leads to one thing. We live better lives, right? We are better problem solvers. We ease stress, our own personal stress and stuff like that. It's a good thing. I have some contacts that I'll connect you with. One of my friends, her name's Mona Antoine. She has a program called Mindfulness Leader, and she teaches young people meditation techniques and stuff like that. And, maybe there will be some kind of good marriage.
Yeah, whoever you meet, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, awesome. So let me ask you the final question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, how happy and fulfilled are you in your life?
I'd say I am pretty close to 10. I'd say 9.7, 9.8. I'm doing what I'm doing here. If this hits, I hit a 10, because I had really thought to the point where I was done and I was just going to help trading firms. And then now that this has come along, I'm at a point where I say, okay, I'm happy where I am. I got to do this one last thing and make sure that this lives on forever.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, my friend, if there's anything I can do, I'm all in with you on this mission, and I'd like to learn some of this stuff as well.
Sure.
I always say it doesn't take too much to overload my medium-sized brain, so I want to give it a little more capacity before I short circuit,
Right.
What a pleasure to have you. It's been an honor to have you on. I haven't seen you in 20 years, my friend.
Right. And if anyone wants more information, they could go to MikeByster.com.
Awesome.
And if they need to contact me, they could contact me through the website.
Awesome. And I'll put the link on as well.
Okay. So, thank you so much, Frank.
Thank you for joining us on the Warrior Podcast, everyone. Remember, there's a warrior inside us all. We'll see you at our next show.